Welcome to another episode of Over This Should podcast. We are so excited to have you here. And today we have a fantastic strategic coach. Her name is Sandy Stadler, and she really helps create high performance mindset teams. And she does this through helping hone in on executive presence. Her thoughtfulness, the way she leads teams in her coaching business is extraordinary. And I am so excited to introduce her to you. And more importantly, Sandy, if there's anything you want to say to introduce yourself to the audience, you'd probably do it 1,000 times better than me. Go for it.
Hi, Pamela. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you, which I'm very excited about. And you have introduced me in a fantastic way. I don't think I could have done that better than you.
That's really kind. Thank you. Well, I'm excited to have you here because we've had a chance to speak a little bit in the past, and just you were dropping nothing but knowledge nuggets on me, and I loved it. So I want to be able to share that with the audience. But I noticed in your LinkedIn bio, it now says executive presence in 2 days is an offering that you have. And that is really intriguing when I think about people trying to grow in their career. How many folks are worried about checking off certifications and experience and don't even think about how they're showing up? So if you don't mind sharing with us a little bit more about what is executive presence, how could you possibly get it figured out in 2 days? I can't wait to hear it all.
Thanks. Let's start with what I love to ask is this question. Imagine that your technical competency, which is your technical knowledge, skills, and experience, is a 10 out of 10. But your executive presence is a 3 out of 10. How do you think your technical competency is being perceived by others? As a 3 or as a 10?
As a 3, because how you show up really matters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also there is the other side of the coin, which is you can be very competent, but if you lack confidence, your lack of confidence can be perceived as lack of competence. And that's why executive presence is so important.
So for those who don't know much about executive presence, how would you describe it?
So when we ask people, so what is executive presence? And this is a very complex question. But usually people tend to say, so when I can see someone or identify someone executive present, I think about confidence, gravitas, communication, people that can communicate effectively, influencing, persuasion. And it is. Like research shows this is, but this is only one part of executive presence. This is the delivery of the executive presence. So what we can physically see others. But there is other components of the executive presence, one being mindset, the thoughts we have about ourselves and others really impact on how we show up. Because if we don't believe in ourselves, why would others do?
Absolutely. You know, you can dress the part, you could put on your suit. I think there's something to be said about faking it until you make it from a outside perspective, but you will never fully show up authentically. You will never fully show up ready to engage and speak if you don't already on the inside feel like you can, like you're capable. So that confidence is a huge part of being able to show up in executive presence.
Absolutely. And then we have the component of connecting with others and managing the perception others have of you. Because executive presence is not only about you, it's about how others perceive you and experience you. So there is a lot going in. So who are the people that I need to influence in my career?
That's interesting. I understand the concept of that. Help me understand a little bit more about how you can influence people's perception of you. Perception is reality, right? But people perceive things based on their own filters and their own lenses. So how can you influence somebody's perception of you?
Okay, you can. And I know where you're coming from, and it's true. But also when people don't have information, and because no one starts with a blank slate, we all have these filters. So when people don't have information about who you are, what you do, they will fill the gaps with their perception. And that's why you need to be proactive in building these relationships and telling the narrative you want people to associate with you, rather just hoping whatever you are doing is going to be perceived in the right way. And that's where influence comes in. But one thing that people don't understand is, for example, when you go into the boardroom and you want to get the buy-in from people, the influence does not start in that point in the boardroom when you are sharing your idea. It starts before that, what we call persuasion. It's all the things you do before the point when you actually need the buy-in. And that's why building these relationships is important.
Okay, so part of the persuasion is networking and relationship building, the key element. What else would go into persuasion?
Relationships, building relationships is the key. And the best way to build, obviously, to be genuine, because people can feel if you are not being genuine with your intentions. And contribute, giving value. And I see a little bit relationships in life and work as bank deposits. You cannot withdraw money from the bank until you make a deposit first. And then you have the right of making a withdrawal. And it's the principle of reciprocation. When you receive value from other people, you will automatically feel like you want to give something back.
That's an interesting analogy because it makes me think about you deposit in so you can withdraw eventually, and you're establishing credit. And when you have that credit established, you have this number associated with you that tells somebody else, Sandy is excellent. She's going to deliver every time. She's borrowed and she's returned. So that's almost as important. Having this credit that's established, having people know that you are who you say you are, and being willing to say your name in another room that you aren't in. I remember reading one of your posts that one of the biggest mistakes a person can make is depending on their manager to advocate for them and not doing so much self-advocacy. And I 100% agree that self-advocacy it's just going to set you apart. Knowing how to speak about yourself in a way that is a stack of evidence and not so much hubris is hugely important. I also think it's really important to have that credit established and have people say your names in rooms that you're not in. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, 100%. And the self-advocacy is the third element.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's fine. Which is about us being able to communicate the value we bring, rather than expecting my hard work should speak for itself. It will not. Work does not speak for itself. You will have to speak for yourself. And if you think about, I don't know if you had this experience in your career, it's like usually the people promoted are not the ones that are the higher performance when it comes to performance, but are the ones that can communicate that really well.
Yes, I've definitely seen that.
Right? That is the key. And also because when that important conversation about your career is going to happen, you will not be in the room. And that's why it is very important to build this team of cheerleaders, which comes with building intentional and proactive relationships with key stakeholders. Because you need this team to advocate for you when you are not in the room.
So how would somebody establish who those key stakeholders are?
That's a great question. That's what we call the stakeholder engagement map, which is thinking about the key people that really influence your career progression. And usually they are your manager, their peers, your manager peers and his manager peers, and maybe some of your peers.
Okay.
And you need to ask yourself, okay, so who are the decision makers who really have the influence, the power to make things happen in this business? And then you rate that relationship on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being they don't even know my name, 10, they would probably invite me to their wedding. And then you need to ask yourself, okay, if the relationship is a 4, what can I do to make that a 6? And one way of doing it is ask the person, speak with them and say, look, I'm very interested on your department, if it's a different department, and how can my department or can I contribute to your goals in the business? What are your KPIs? What are some of the goals? What are the projects you are involved? And how can we bring value? That's a way of doing it.
I love that. Definitely opening the door to how can I better serve you? What are you finding to be some of the biggest struggles with leaders having executive presence?
Public speaking is still the fear number one for many people, which is not very common. When people see people being brilliant public speakers, they just think that's natural. More often than not, it's not. There is a very small portion of the society that are really good public speaking naturally. The others, they have just trained immensely because it is a skill and you can develop. So I would say that like talking, speaking up in meetings or delivering presentation, anytime you do speak to someone else in public, that's considered public speaking.
You play like you practice. I think just getting reps in and getting the opportunity to use your voice and feel comfortable and see how people respond is really important. So when you're working with clients, where do you tell them to start practicing to get those opportunities?
So do you remember the 2-day program? So that is the first point.
Okay.
People have to deliver presentations during the 2 days. So it is a 2-day intense program where they will obviously learn the tools, skills, frameworks around executive presence, including mindset and demonstrating value. But a large proportion is about their delivery, their vocal and visual impact. Because when people are communicating, they focus too much on the words. And what do we know about the percentage of the importance of the words in our communication? It is just about, the importance is about 7-8%. That's their impact. So our body language and our vocal impact is far greater. And people usually neglect that part. They focus in creating this beautiful PowerPoint, but then when deliver the message, people are switched off. They are disengaged in like 2 seconds.
They're delivering monotone or this robotic.
Yes, or not even interesting. So that's what we do. And then obviously at work, because practice makes permanent. After they go through our program, they feel confident. After the 2 days, there is a transformation when they see, because we record the presentations and they can see their progress within the 6-7 presentations. And everyone that watched the first and the last, they said, that's not the same person.
Wow.
So they will build their confidence. And when they go back to their workplace, they will start putting their hands up for the opportunities to speak. And they know that then the more they do it, the better they become.
That's really interesting. And I haven't heard anybody offer a program like that with only 2 days of being together, creating the kind of impact that your program is creating. Can you tell us a little bit more about the framework? And then is it delivered virtually? Do you have to be in person? What does it look like?
So currently only in person, because the impact and the quality in person and virtual is not the same. We are thinking about creating an online version, which will be kind of the foundation of the program for people who cannot travel to London, which is the most part of our programs take place in central London, that will still love the experience. We are right now designing something for the rest of the population. But so far we deliver in person 2 days. And the structure of the program, we meet with each participant 2-3 weeks before to set a goal for the program. So it's like, okay, in 3 months, what will success look like for you? Because we want to help them individually and as a team when they are from the same organization to achieve their goals.
I love that. I want to pivot for just a second. You have a business with your husband, and I'm so
Yes.
curious, what led you to this field, this niche, deciding to start this business and making the impact that you're making? What brought you here?
So my background is corporate. I was a senior manager in the food industry in the UK I worked there for over 8 years. And then, but I was already very interested in the realms of mindset, psychology, neuroscience. I've done that for many, many years. And I kind of use my teams as guinea pigs, but in a good way, because I love it to test everything. And I've created 3 teams of high performance. All my teams were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point that my manager was like, look, which was the MD, I want you to teach what you are doing with your teams to the other managers. And that's where the interest for training started, because I was training my peers, my style of leadership, which was a leadership coaching style. I was not telling people what to do, I was asking them questions.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the secret. And we both know that works better than telling people what to do.
Absolutely.
Right? And then in the meantime, I met my husband, not work related. And then he was with Dale Carnegie, the training company, for a few years. So we worked with them for over 10 years, but he was thinking about leaving and starting his own business. And I was at a time of my career that I wanted something different. At the time, I just thought maybe I just need another promotion. But when he mentioned that to me, and like doing the training, the coaching, I was like, that is going to be so more exciting than to be a manager, because I love the part of people, of being manager of people, the processes, not so much, because I like the part of implementing new processes, but then the sustainment was not for me. It's like I just wanted new things all the time,
Yes.
solving problems, solving challenges. That's what got me really excited. And then the people, that you have challenge all the time. And then, well, when I focused more on the training, still in corporate, and I saw the transformation, and that for me was so rewarding. I was like, yeah, I definitely can do this for a living. And that's how everything started.
Tell me more about the women that are coming to you to be coached. What are the trends that you're seeing that they need to be coached in and on, and what kind of recommendations do you give?
Okay, so I would say the biggest challenge is the self-belief, which usually is called lack of confidence, but the reality is lack of self-belief, which can show up as imposter syndrome, very known, like that little voice in their head that tells them they are not good enough, not qualified enough, not experienced enough to progress or to be where they are. So I would say that is one of them. Other challenge is very technical, competent women. They are promoted, but they are not given the guidance into the leadership. So the way they operate is still very operational, doing stuff rather than strategic as a leader. So that transition of going from doing to leading, that's also a challenge that I help my clients with. But I would say that's higher director, VP levels. And this active presence, to build in their presence, their communication, public speaking, presentation skills around that area. But the foundation of all of these is the mindset, is the stories we tell ourselves.
So that's the base of most coaches' work, is the mindset piece. When you are working with women and you know that they're struggling with the imposter syndrome and the self-doubt and self-belief, what are some of the tips or tricks you give them to get them started in unraveling those wires?
So one thing is to understand like their saboteurs, which is what is the patterns of thinking, of beliefs that they have ingrained in their brains. One very common is the perfectionism. That's very, very common for women to have these huge standards that are above the reality.
Right.
And then stick to them and work so hard, but they never finish because these are unrealistic standards. They dwell on mistakes forever rather than moving forward. So it is to understand these beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that sometimes helps them is to understand where they originate, which is usually their upbringing, childhood, things they learn from their parents, their environment, the experience they have. And at that time, they accept as truth.
Mm-hmm.
But because we think, because we have a thought, it doesn't mean that thought is true. So demystifying a little bit whilst giving the science really helps them to then implement tools. And the first step is always awareness. Okay, we need to see, to note what are these thoughts, these beliefs that are in your head.
Mm-hmm.
They are shaping your reality. And that is the first step.
I love that. I don't talk about it. I completely stole this from science and research, but the ants, the automatic negative thoughts, if we could just listening to that inner voice that is uncharming and deceitful and usually unkind, and write down, document, what are those negative thoughts? I've gained so much weight. I look terrible in my clothes. I'm not going to be able to stand in front of people and speak. I'm doing a terrible job as a mom today. Like, what are those things? And then where did it come from? How can you tell yourself a truer, more beautiful story about that moment? Yeah, you know what? I had really enjoyed myself last night and I had 2 cups of wine and I'm a little bloated today. This too shall pass. I'm not going to get every parenting moment right, but I love my kids and they know I love them. So just figuring out ways to recognize these negative thoughts that have been with us from a very young age when we were told how we should be and what was wrong with us.
To reframe in a way that's still true for you. Because one thing that I am against is affirmations. Because when we don't believe, we cannot change. Our conscious mind is 5% of what we experience, right? Everything is in our subconscious. And then you are trying with 5% of your brain change 95 by just saying something is not going to work. And that's why I understand where positive affirmations come from, but I'm an advocate for reframing more than positive affirmations because it needs to feel true for you, what you are saying.
I think that is so important. Personally, I struggled with just a lot of negative thoughts, negative beliefs about myself. And when I was doing research and looking at Instagram or all the places, everything felt really positive. There's positive affirmations. It ended up making me feel fake when I stood in front of a mirror and I said, I love my body, but I didn't love my body. And so the process I took myself on was going from negative to neutral. I'm so thankful for my body. I am so thankful that I can get up and walk to the front door and walk my kids out to the bus. And I just went to a place of neutral until I could get to the next step, which is I'm so thankful for my legs because they walked me to the bus stop. My legs are looking okay these days. And it took 5 years to get to a place where I feel better about my insides and my outsides, but I had to go to neutral before I could ever get to positive.
One thing you can ask is instead of, okay, I love my body when it doesn't happen. What parts of your body you love? Maybe it's the eyes, maybe it's the hair, something. There will be something that you like about your body and focus on those things first.
Yeah, I love that.
Because then it will expand, right? The more we focus on the positive things, the more we will start seeing.
Yes, where your energy goes, your mind flows. I believe it's close to that. Yeah, 100%. So how do we look at that at work? How do we find those little things that help build our confidence at work? What would that be?
Those are the small and big wins that we are very quick to dismiss. They happen. We are, especially if if I see from a lens of a perfectionist mindset, which I'm very familiar because I was there in the past, you focus so much on what you have not achieved, what is lacking, what is missing, what is not ready, that you are very quick to dismiss what you have actually achieved and celebrate it. So one of the steps is every week you write down your wins, be it small or big, it doesn't matter. Just even if the win is I sent that email without reviewing it 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
I have spoken up in a meeting. Whatever that is for you, you write down. Because what you are going to do is to shift your focus from the lacking to what you're actually achieving. And you will be surprised how much you have achieved. Because as I said, we are so quick to dismiss the great things that we do. And when you start writing them down, you realize, okay, actually, I'm doing more than I gave myself credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And because confidence is a result, not a prerequisite, is the result of taking action and achieving success or small wins, you will start build your confidence at work.
Yeah, I love that. Writing it down and taking a moment is also releases dopamine in your brain. It's a bit of that success.
Yeah.
I feel good about myself in this moment.
And also celebrating, which is an important step, which also releases dopamine and teaches your body, oh, this is actually a good thing. Let's do this more often.
So I do that with my team as well. We'll do a what's your win or your high of the week. We have team building on Fridays, and it's really great to people sometimes have to stop and think. And it might be something as simple as I was able to get out today at lunch and walk my dog because we're just stacked with meetings. And then sometimes they created a demo for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and it was a success. So it scales. It's really small things, it's really big things, but getting them to start practicing that and recognizing it, then the cohort around them also recognize them. That's so good. I'm so glad you got out with your dogs, or you crushed that demo. It was amazing. I think also helps feed that confidence because so many times we have this momentary accolade from somebody, you did a good job, and it feels really good to hear that, and you want to hear it again. So you just hustle right to the next activity without taking a moment to truly celebrate that little victory. And to your point, I love that you said, these little tiny actions and successes, they become a stack of proof that you are who you say you are and you can deliver, and that increases your confidence.
Yes. And that is great for the imposter syndrome too. Although a lot of people think or talk about overcoming imposter syndrome and getting rid of imposter syndrome, I have a different take. I actually think imposter syndrome is a healthy clue that you are playing a big game. That's how I see it. So I kind of embrace it because I know it's there because I am dreaming big. So I don't try to quiet, but I understand that for some people, that feeling of fraud, of not being deserved, this is a great exercise. Okay, if you do actually believe that you are here by accident, let's look at your chronology, what brought you to this step where you are right now. And that's when they acknowledge, actually, I've done a lot to be here.
I love that. And then from that point on, if you start documenting weekly your wins, you don't have to dig so hard into what did I do because they're there for you, small or big. And
yes,
it just helps you.
And that also helps when it comes to speaking about that with other people. For instance, your manager on the appraisal meetings.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm always looking for ways to say the same thing. Write down your accomplishment, put it in a OneNote or your notebook or wherever you put it, because at the end of the day, as a supervisor myself, I am not going to remember everything my whole team accomplished. I can't barely keep up with my own self. So I need them to advocate. Back to what you said, step 3, self-advocacy. I need them to advocate for themselves. And that means they have to keep up with their wins. They have to keep up with their successes. So keeping that track record helps you self-advocate. It feeds your manager what they need in order to help complete that performance review. So it is full circle important that you celebrate yourself, that you document it, and then you feed that information into helping you elevate in your career.
100%.
I love that. Are there techniques or formats that you use to help people pull out their accomplishments?
Well, when initially you start, just ask them to reflect on what they have done in the past few years, and whilst they are in that position, what they have done. Even previously, I can go back up to the uni time. And then moving forward is about the weekly wins. Because as you say, like, if you think about a few years back, you probably remember the big things you accomplished, not the small ones. But as soon as you start recording them down, you will train your brain to focus on the small things. So you start seeing more of them and probably remember also the small things. But regarding the big things and the past, I tell them, okay, write a letter to yourself with all these amazing things you have done and accomplished. Because those days that you don't think that you are deserving of that place, you are going to read that letter back to you.
That's really beautiful. That's an important exercise. Yeah. I'm going to implement that. That's awesome.
It is. It is about remembering ourselves, because our brain is designed with a negative bias, unfortunately. So we are very quick to see the negative on things rather than the positives. Seeing positive takes time, effort, and energy. Is not the natural way we are designed. And as soon as people understand that, they become more self-compassionate with themselves, because they understand, okay, this is a biology thing, it's not me. But I am committed to train my brain in a different way, which is possible through neuroplasticity. We can change the way our brain is rewired, which is a great thing.
It is a great
thing. But it takes time.
Yes.
And energy, anything. Like anything, it is a skill. Like when you start driving and everything feels impossible because it's so many things to remember, but now you go from A to B without even remembering. It is exactly the same process.
Oh, that's so relatable. I have a daughter who's 16, and when she first got her permit, she was like, I'm never going to be able to drive as fast as this traffic is going. I'm not going to remember these things. Does my left foot go on the brake and my right foot on the gas? I'm like, whoa, what is happening here? And now she's just zipping all around the place, and I'm having to tell her, like, slow down. What has happened? Where did you get all this driving confidence? And the driving confidence came from being a teenager whose prefrontal cortex is not fully formed, but also getting reps in and time behind the wheel. So I love that you said it's biology too. I've done a lot of, I think, probably similar training as you, and neuroplasticity is a huge part of my practice. But just being able to stop when you're in the middle of a negative thought, or the constant 95% of your subconscious chattering at you and saying, okay, this is biology. Thank you, reptilian brain, for trying to keep me safe. However, I am okay being on the verge of the next thing, or, whatever that conversation might be. And to what you were saying earlier with imposter syndrome, I totally agree with you. I think that if you let it rule you, then it is negative, and it is something you have to work on. If you listen to it as an internal indicator that you're just on the edge of your comfort zone, and you might feel like a fraud right now, but you're not a fraud because you have that stack of proof of your accomplishments, but rather you're about to do something new and grow and be expansive. And that's okay to be scary, but you're qualified for it. That's a much better way than I'm a fraud, I'm scared, and turning away from opportunities.
Yeah. And the question I always ask someone who suffers from imposter syndrome is, are you capable of learning? And they say yes. And I'm like, so it is just a matter of time until you learn how to do this, right? Because that's what it is. It is scary because of the uncertainty, the unknown, and our brain is like, there is something wrong, alarm. But I think it's becoming comfortable with the unknown, with the uncertainty. That's the trick. Yeah. And it's not easy. I am in the process of doing that myself, like to be open to the unknown and the uncertainty rather than trying to have a plan for everything. To mitigate the unknown, the uncertainty. I'm training myself to actually be comfortable with the unknown. Okay, I don't need to know everything. And I think when you do not have a plan for everything, there is so much more possibilities for you out there because you are not focused on that plan. There is more things happen that you may notice because you don't have the plan.
Yeah, that's true. It's a conundrum for me. I definitely am an overthinker. This is a weakness, also a strength. So to that point, overthinking for me, I constantly think about, okay, what's the next 3 or 4 steps down the road? Who's impacted? What do I need to prep for? What kind of communications do I need to lean into ahead of time? Where that becomes a weakness is it can slow me down, right? Because I'm thinking farther ahead, and I have a team of people who are agile and iterative, and they're like, let's just get something out there. And I'm like, but if we get it out there in this state today, 2 people down the line are probably thinking this. And I definitely have a team member who's like, you're overthinking all of these things. Let's just put it out. Is there anything I do not think is unique to me. So is there anything you do when you're working with executives or people who want to be executives to help them with overthinking?
Well, it is about risk mitigating, right? So you can overthink forever, or you can be okay with good enough.
Good enough.
And that is the question. What does good enough look like for you? Is that maybe 70%? Okay, you have thought this through 70%. This is okay. It doesn't need to be 100% of all the tick boxes. And it depends on how that impacts you. If you are just like agile and strategic thinking, but does that create anxiety and worry for you? Because that must be my focus. Okay. It can be healthy, the thinking ahead, but how much impact is that having as an emotional burden? Because you know that anxiety and worry are catabolic emotions, so they will drain your energy, and then you do not have the energy maybe for the creative thinking.
Yeah,
Because
what is good enough for you? How far can you take it where I'm good? 70% is a good rule. So something you said earlier, I think it's one of the offerings in your coaching program where you have women who are moving from tacticians, the doers, to a leadership role. And so they have to be more strategic and lead versus just do. This is something I struggled with and what really was the pivotal point for me. And I think most high performers, high achievers are probably perfectionists, are probably a little bit more type A personalities. So what really was a turning point for me was when I was forced to delegate because I just didn't have time left. And so I was forced to delegate. And then I delegated this big task that I never would have before. And what came back to me was better than anything I could have ever put together on my own. And so just seeing that this is not an echo chamber. I do not need to be doing all of this by myself. There's so many creative, thoughtful, amazing, talented people on the team, and they need opportunities to shine. So the delegation was a big part of stepping a little bit less out of that doer role and more into the leadership role. What else do you recommend for women in that kind of pivotal moment where they're just changing into a leadership role?
Well, there is a few steps that I like to take. And one is to do a calendar audit to see where they are spending their time. And usually meetings is the number one. Many meetings. So we need to start freeing up some time because for you to be strategic, you need time to think strategically. Otherwise, you just go into your default, which is operational, doing stuff. And then we do a task audit. So all their tasks, they write down. Then they write down the time they take each week to complete each task. And then they ask themselves the question, what's the impact for the business? Is this high impact? Does this bring bottom line results? Medium or low impact? Anything that is low impact, they have to either delete from their schedule, if that's possible, delegate or automate.
Okay, I love that.
And then we also do an analysis on the things of maybe they are medium impact, not low impact, but do require their skills. And as you say, there may be people more competent to actually do that and do a better job. And you really need to own your zone of genius skills rather than trying to do everything. And I think it stems from the fear of when you go into a leadership position, you feel like you need to have all the responses, all the answers, and
Yes.
you feel like that you need to know how to do everything. And that is not true. And that's why you have a team.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to get the best out of your team. You don't need to have all the answers, and you definitely don't need to know how to do everything.
Right.
Otherwise, you just spend your time learning new things that are not bringing any business results.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I love the idea of the calendar and task audit. I think that's a really smart way to spend time in figuring out what you can delegate, just remove entirely, or ensure that you're making it one of your top priorities of the week because it is important. But having that granularity and taking time for that, I think that's really important. And it's often not something we give ourselves. How often do we have time to plan the time we're going to spend on everything? Because we're just hopping from task to task. But being intentional and how you set your week up is really important and a direct correlation to success.
It is. So I would say like that is the first step to really understand what's happening, because if you cannot measure, you cannot control. So you need to be very clear where you are spending all your time right now. And then the second step is the boundaries.
Yes, which is also hard.
But it is ask the questions, what is really important
Mm-hmm.
for me to succeed in this position? And you have to start saying no to all the things they are not. I was going to share a quote that just came to mind that it changed my perspective. I'm not sure who the author is about boundaries and say no. The difference between successful and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. And I was like, that's very interesting because they're very intentional with their time
Mm-hmm.
and energy.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense to me. Saying no is tricky for a lot of people. How I talked about not being able to go straight to positivity and I had to get into neutral first, saying no was kind of similar for me. I started to say things that felt more positive than just no. I was scared of how I would be perceived if I became somebody who said no. So I learned to say things like that somebody's telling me, asking me to do a new task. That sounds like it's really important to you. And I would love to be able to work on that. Here are the 5 priorities that are currently on my plate. What should I remove so I can add this one? And
Mhm.
that felt better for me because I wasn't outright saying, no, are you crazy? Do you not see how much work I have? Like, what planet do you live on? Because that's what I wanted to say. But instead it was, okay, good idea, but also, what you taking away,
Yeah.
boss? And so just being able to find those places where you're comfortable with your version of no.
And don't get me wrong, some people have gone far in their careers because they have said yes too often,
Yes.
right? But then when you are in a leadership position, you need time, and saying yes to everything will lead to burnout. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you need to avoid. But saying no sometimes doesn't mean no. Sometimes it means, okay, let me look at my schedule and come back to you later. And
Mm-hmm.
you have time to think. You don't have to say no. And as you say, okay, this is what I have on my task, my priorities, is that, and ask the question, is that more important than anything? Should I remove anything?
Mm-hmm.
Also brings awareness to the person that's asking you, especially if he's your manager, because he will not or she will not control everything you do 24/7, right? And sometimes bringing that awareness is important.
Yeah, I completely agree. When I started that practice, what my boss's response was, why are you doing all of that? To which my counters, because you assigned me all of that. But our bosses get busy. They have their own hustle going on. They're trying to be strategic in their own ways while also probably having tactical things to do. So they forget. And what's interesting about just making sure you're capturing your priorities, again, writing them down, is that also feeds into your performance review because everybody will not remember all of the cool projects.
Amazing work.
Right, exactly. So when you have those priorities and those things you're working on, they've made it to a list that you need to reflect on. Make sure you're documenting them so they can go into your performance review.
Absolutely. I am all about recording because I like facts and figures.
Yes.
So just show them. Because especially I used to have a review every 3 months, but I know not every manager is like that. And some will happen just once a year. And who is going to remember everything they have done in a year? You probably remember the last few weeks or a big accomplishment, and that's it.
I totally agree with you. I know most corporations I've worked for to this point have a yearly review, and just racking your brain trying to remember what you did, or if you have direct reports, what they did. You could probably remember a couple things, but there's so many small impact moments that happen throughout someone's career journey that if you're not recording it, it is missed. So I think that's vitally important. So you're obviously a genius when it comes to executive presence, to helping men and women be able to communicate better, to use their voices, to show up in a way that's authentic, to network, to build the relationships. All of that stuff is vitally important. Where can people find you? How do they sign up for programs or newsletters or whatever your offers are?
LinkedIn will be my main platform. My name is Sandy the Stadler, and I believe I'm the only one in LinkedIn. So it will not be difficult to find me.
I know you gave me a quote already, but I love wrapping up the podcast with
another quote.
Your favorite quote, because I'm a quote collector. What is your current favorite quote?
Going back to mindsets are probably the biggest because it's the foundation of everything we do. I'd say one of my favorite quotes is nothing changes in your life until you change.
Very true. Very relevant to everything we just spoke about as well. That's a good one.
So the time that you change your mindset and how you see yourself and others, everything will change.
I love that. I love that. This was a wonderful conversation. I'm so grateful you came to the podcast, Sandy.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure to share time with you. Yeah.